I always thought the day my child was born would be the pinnacle of my life. The day everything came full circle, the sacrifices, the hard work, the long nights at the job, all of it would finally make sense. When the doctor smiled and said, "Both mother and baby are healthy," a weight lifted from my chest. I exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. The nurse placed my daughter in my arms, and the whole room seemed to stop. The hum of machines, the shuffle of feet, the voices around me, everything faded into silence. I looked down at her tiny face, her dark curls, her warm skin. She was beautiful. But in that instant, a sharp truth cut through my chest. She didn't look like me, not even close. For a moment, I tried to push the thought aside. Babies change. I told myself. They grow, they shift. Features take time. But as I glanced up, searching for reassurance in the one person who should have met me with certainty, I saw Laura, my wife, the woman I had trusted with my life. She couldn't meet my eyes. She looked away, staring down at the hospital sheets, as if they might swallow her whole. That silence between us screamed louder than any confession. It was heavy, suffocating, a gulf I couldn't cross with words. My arms trembled as I held that child, torn between awe at the miracle of life and dread at the possibility that she wasn't mine. I forced myself to smile for the nurses, to nod when they asked if I wanted a photo, to stand tall as if I was still the proud new father. But inside, my world was already collapsing. Every heartbeat felt like a hammer driving in the truth I wasn't ready to face. I thought back to the vows Laura and I had spoken, the promises about trust, about honesty, about building a future together. And now, here in the room where life was supposed to begin, I felt something inside me die. The happiest day of my life had just become the moment my world split in two, and I knew nothing would ever be the same again. My name is John Miller. I'm 42 years old, born and raised in Dallas, Texas. I work as a construction project manager, and I've spent most of my life building things that are meant to last: bridges, schools, foundations strong enough to weather storms. There's a certain pride in that, knowing the work of your hands will hold steady long after you're gone. For years, I thought I'd managed to build my personal life the same way: solid, unshakable, rooted deep. I met Laura 10 years ago at a charity event. It wasn't anything glamorous, just a fundraiser to help rebuild a community center after a flood. She was there with a group of friends, and I noticed her right away. Not because she was trying to stand out, but because she wasn't. While others worked the room, clinking glasses and making small talk, Laura was rolling up her sleeves, carrying boxes, setting up tables. She laughed easily. The kind of laugh that cuts through noise and lands straight in your chest. I offered to help her with a stack of chairs, and what should have been a 30-second chore turned into a 30-minute conversation. We talked about simple things that night: her love of gardening, my obsession with building model bridges as a kid, the little quirks of growing up in Texas summers. But from the start, it felt natural, no pretenses, no need to impress. Just two people who fit together in conversation the way puzzle pieces do, like the edges were already shaped for one another. A few weeks later, I asked her to dinner. She said yes, with that same unguarded smile. From there, it unfolded the way love stories do in quiet corners of life. There were late-night drives with the windows down, cheap tacos on plastic trays, evenings spent talking about dreams that felt too big to admit to anyone else. She wanted to see the world beyond Texas. I wanted to build something that outlived me, Somewhere in between, we found common ground. When I proposed, it wasn't some grand gesture. It was a Saturday afternoon on the porch of her apartment. The sun dipping low. The sky streaked orange and pink. I pulled out a ring, simple, nothing flashy, and told her the truth that she had changed my life. That I couldn't picture the future without her in it. She said yes before I finished asking. That moment wasn't just a promise. It was the foundation stone of the life I thought we'd spend forever building. Our wedding was small. A backyard gathering at her parents' house. No chandeliers. No ballrooms. No spotlight. Just the people who mattered most. A white arch wrapped in ivy. And vows spoken with tears in our eyes. We promised patience, trust, and loyalty. Promises I believed with every fiber of my being. Afterward, we bought a little fixer-upper in a quiet neighborhood. The roof leaked. The carpet was ugly. And the kitchen was stuck somewhere in the 70s. But to us, it was home. We spent weekends covered in paint, arguing over which couch to buy, laughing as we pulled weeds from a yard that hadn't seen care in years. Laura insisted on painting the front door, a bright yellow, something that would make the house look welcoming. I built shelves from old reclaimed wood. Together, we turned flaws into character, and four walls into a place where love seemed to settle in the corners. Life fell into a rhythm. Mornings with coffee and burnt toast. Friday nights with pizza and movies. Arguing about what to watch, but always ending up under the same blanket. Sundays filled with family, her parents or mine. Food on the table. Conversation drifting into laughter. They weren't extravagant traditions, but they were ours. And in those small rituals, I found the quiet joy I'd always been searching for. For years, I told myself we were solid, strong, the kind of couple other people looked at and thought, they've got it figured out. I believed our life was built like the bridges I managed, anchored deep, supported by steel, able to withstand pressure. I thought love was like concrete, hard, durable, impossible to break once it's set. But I was wrong. I believed loyalty and hard work could hold anything together. I didn't realize that loyalty, when given blindly, you can leave you standing on cracks you don't even see until the ground splits open beneath your feet. And for me, that truth came too late. 2 years into our marriage, the idea of becoming parents stopped being just a dream we tossed around at family dinners. It began to feel real. We were both steady in our careers. The house finally felt like home. And for the first time, the future didn't feel like something far away. It felt like something we could reach out and grab. Laura brought it up one evening over dinner. She set her fork down, looked at me across the table, and said she was ready. Ready to try for a child. My chest tightened. Not with fear, but with a rush of excitement I could barely contain. I'd always wanted to be a father, but I also knew the responsibility that came with it. We didn't jump in blindly. That wasn't our way. For weeks, we planned. We sat down with notepads and calculators, mapping out our finances, looking at daycare options, talking about college savings, even though the baby wasn't yet conceived. We talked about which room would become the nursery, whether we'd need a bigger car, and how we'd handle the sleepless nights. It wasn't glamorous, but it was deliberate. Every plan, every detail felt like one more brick in the life we were building together. When Laura finally told me she was pregnant, it wasn't with a big announcement or a crowd around us. She handed me a tiny pair of baby shoes, knitted and barely big enough to cover my palm. For a moment, I just stared. my brain trying to catch up with my eyes. Then it hit me all at once. I was going to be a father. The laughter that spilled out of me was half joy, half disbelief. I wrapped her in my arms. And for the first time in my life, I felt completely full, like nothing was missing. Almost immediately, the spare bedroom transformed. Laura wanted soft, warm colors, sunny yellows, gentle creams. We spent Saturdays moving out old furniture, taping off the walls, covering the carpet with plastic sheets. I rolled the paint while she worked carefully along the edges, humming quietly to herself. Piece by piece, the room became a place of promise. We bought a crib, a dresser, a rocking chair. We hung little prints of animals on the walls. And she picked out a mobile of stars and clouds. Sometimes at night, we'd just stand in the doorway, looking in at the space we created, imagining the life that would soon fill it. The pregnancy gave us new rituals. Wednesday evenings, we went to prenatal classes at the hospital. We sat in a bright room with other expectant parents, learning how to swaddle a baby, how to breathe through contractions. I took notes like it was college all over again. At home, we stacked books on parenting on the coffee table. Laura read them cover to cover, highlighting things I thought I'd forget. Every page, every fact, felt like preparing armor for the life ahead. But it wasn't just the classes or the books. It was the quiet, intimate moments that etched themselves into me. Saturday mornings, when she called me into the bedroom just to feel the baby kicking beneath her hand. Late nights when I lay with my palm on her growing belly, whispering words to a life I couldn't yet see but already loved. The sound of that tiny, rapid heartbeat during ultrasounds, it made my throat tighten every single time. Friends and family celebrated with us. There was a baby shower in her parents' backyard. Laughter spilling into the afternoon air. Tables covered with tiny onesies and pastel decorations. For a few hours, the world felt perfectly safe, surrounded by people who loved us. I thought, this is it. This is everything. Looking back now, I realize those were the snapshots of a future I thought was guaranteed. Back then, I truly believed I was standing at the peak of my life. I didn't know it wasn't the summit at all. It was only the calm before the storm. At first, the changes were so subtle I almost convinced myself I was imagining them. Laura had always been committed to her job. But suddenly the late nights at the office became more frequent. A text message here and there. Don't wait up. I've got a project to finish. At first, I believed her without hesitation. Why wouldn't I? She was my wife. But then little things started to pile up. A folded receipt left on the counter from a restaurant. We'd never been to the kind of place we usually saved for anniversaries. 2 entrees, 2 glasses of wine, and dessert. The date printed at the top matched a night she told me she was working late. When I asked casually, she said it was just a quick dinner with a coworker to celebrate a small win. Her voice was steady, her smile practiced. But something in me resisted the explanation. Not long after that, new clothes began showing up. Dresses, shoes, a handbag I knew cost more than we could afford while saving for the baby. But she never wore them around me. When I asked, she brushed it off. It was on sale or a friend gave it to me. Each answer sounded thin. But I let it slide. I told myself it was nothing. It wasn't just the receipts or the clothes. It was her. She started pulling away in ways I couldn't ignore. Laura had always been affectionate, reaching for my hand when we walked through the park, curling into me during movie nights. But now, her fingers stayed in her lap, her eyes fixed on the glow of her phone instead of the screen in front of us. Even when she smiled, it didn't quite reach her eyes. The phone became her shield. She guarded it like it held state secrets, turning it face down on the table, slipping it into her pocket the moment I walked into the room. I tried to convince myself it was work, that the stress of the pregnancy was making her tired, distant. But my gut told me different. Then came the call that changed everything. A coworker of mine phoned one Saturday morning, his tone hesitant. He said he'd just walked past a cafe downtown and spotted Laura sitting with a man he didn't recognize. They weren't just talking, they were leaning in close, laughing in a way that looked far more familiar than professional. I thought it was odd you weren't there, he said. My stomach twisted. That morning, Laura had told me she was staying home, just running errands around the neighborhood. Toast and coffee. She'd said nothing about going downtown, nothing about brunch with another man. When she walked through the door later that afternoon, shopping bags in hand, I asked casually, "Did you have breakfast this morning?" She smiled easily and said, "Yeah, just at home." Her tone was light, almost rehearsed, smooth, confident, like lying had become second nature. I didn't push. Not then. I let her answer hang in the air as I nodded and walked away. But inside, my chest tightened. My gut screamed what my heart didn't want to admit. Something was deeply, dangerously wrong, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like her husband. I felt like a man standing at the edge of a cliff, waiting for the ground beneath me to give way. For now, I stayed silent. But silence wasn't peace anymore. It was the storm gathering, and I knew it was only a matter of time before it broke wide open. It was a Tuesday evening when the next piece of the puzzle slipped into my hands. Laura had just come home, tossed her coat over the chair, and gone upstairs. As I hung it properly in the closet, something shifted in the pocket. I reached in and pulled out a hotel keycard, sleek plastic, with the name of an upscale downtown hotel printed across the front. The kind of place we'd walked past before, joking that maybe someday, on a big anniversary, we'd treat ourselves. The date on the sleeve told me everything. It matched one of the nights she had claimed she was too busy at work. My heart pounded in my chest, but I slipped it back into her pocket, careful not to leave a trace. I didn't confront her, not yet. I wanted to be certain. That night, when she went to shower, I opened our joint bank account on my laptop. My palms sweated as the list of transactions scrolled down the screen. There it was, in black and white, multiple charges to that same hotel, spread across months. Différentes dates. Different amounts, but all leading back to a place I knew we had never stayed together. It wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a pattern. After that, I started noticing everything. Packages arriving at the door with her name on them. Boxes. She rushed to the bedroom before I could see. Sometimes, she slipped them straight into her car trunk and unpacked them later. When she thought I wasn't around, whenever I asked, she brushed me off. Just client gifts. Work stuff. Nothing you'd care about. Her words were casual, but her eyes darted away too quickly. Her appearance changed too. She began putting on more makeup, styling her hair in ways she never used to, soft curls, blowouts, even perfume that lingered in the air after she left. Not maternity clothes or casual workwear, but fitted dresses, high heels, lipstick shades I'd never seen her wear for me. And somehow, those outfits only appeared on the nights she said she had to stay late at the office. I tried once to bring it up. I asked, gently at first, Why all the extra effort lately? The new clothes, the hair appointments. Is there something you're not telling me? Her reflection froze in the mirror for a split second before she turned toward me with sharpness I hadn't heard in years. Why are you making such a big deal out of nothing? You're paranoid. John, her words stung. But not because they were harsh. They stung because they sounded rehearsed. Like she'd practiced them long before I ever asked. I didn't push. I let her walk out the door. The scent of her new perfume trailing behind her like smoke after a fire. But in that moment, something inside me shifted. I wasn't searching for reassurance anymore. I wasn't hoping for explanations or excuses to ease my doubts. I was collecting evidence, piece by piece. I was building a case against the life I thought I had. And with every receipt, every hidden package, every hotel charge, I realized I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. I was watching the truth rise up around me, brick by brick, until it formed a wall I couldn't ignore. And soon, that wall was going to come crashing down. The night it all came crashing down didn't start any differently than the others. Laura said she'd be late again. A big project at work. Tight deadlines. She kissed me on the cheek, grabbed her purse, and slipped out the door in a fitted navy dress I'd never seen before. Her perfume lingered in the air long after she was gone, sharp enough to twist something in my chest. This time, I didn't just sit at home waiting. 15 minutes after she left, I grabbed my keys and followed. I stayed several cars behind. Headlights dimmed whenever I could. My pulse thundered like I was committing a crime. But the bigger crime was not knowing the truth. She didn't drive toward her office. She headed downtown, weaving through streets lit by neon and traffic lights. Before pulling into the circular drive of an upscale hotel, the kind of place we had only ever passed, saying maybe someday, she handed her keys to the valet, smoothed her dress, and stepped through the revolving doors. I parked a block away, walked in a few minutes later, and blended into the background. The lobby gleamed with polished wood and brass, fresh flowers perfuming the air. And there she was, standing near the lounge entrance, scanning the crowd. Then he appeared, tall, well-dressed, confident, a stranger to me, but not to her. Her face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in months. They leaned close, exchanged words I couldn't hear. And then his hand touched her arm. She laughed, touched his shoulder in return. It was obvious. This wasn't business. This wasn't friendship. It was intimacy, the kind you can't fake. I watched them move to a corner table, talking, laughing, leaning in. Then I saw his hand slide onto her knee. She didn't pull away. Instead, she placed her hand over his their fingers curling together with a familiarity that burned through me. My chest clenched as they stood, still talking, still smiling. He reached for her hand, and she took it without hesitation. They walked toward the elevators, side by side. Reflections moving across the gold-trimmed doors like a perfect picture of two people who belong together, just not the two of us. The elevator opened. He stepped in, and she followed, their fingers still interlaced. The doors slid shut, sealing the truth I had feared for months. I didn't move. I didn't storm after them. I just stood there, staring at my own reflection in the polished brass, realizing the life I thought I had was already gone. The next morning, I sat waiting in the living room, suitcase at my side, when Laura walked in wearing the same navy dress. She froze. Her eyes darted to the suitcase. Then back to me. I thought you were working late last night. I said quietly. I was. She answered too quickly, moving toward the kitchen. Don't. I said, sharper this time. She stopped mid-step. For the first time in months. She looked uncertain. I stood, gripping the suitcase handle. I followed you. I saw you at the Grand Summit Hotel. I saw him. I saw you holding hands, laughing, going upstairs together. Her face went pale. I kept going. The hotel key card in your coat pocket, the charges on our bank account, the dinners, the clothes, the lies. I know, the silence that followed was heavier than any scream. Finally, she whispered, "It's true. I've been seeing someone." My throat tightened, but I forced the words out. "Is the baby mine?" She froze. That pause told me more than any confession. Her eyes welled. Her lips trembled. And then came the whisper that shattered whatever was left of me. I don't know. When the shock wore off, only cold clarity remained. I called a lawyer the very next day. In our state, proof of infidelity and a DNA test could end a marriage quickly. And I had both. The paternity test was blunt, merciless in its wording. Probability of paternity 0%. I told myself I already knew, but seeing it printed in black and white still felt like a punch to the chest. The baby I had painted walls for, dreamed names for, whispered to at night, that child wasn't mine. She was the proof of Laura's betrayal. The court process was short but brutal. We sat on opposite sides of a quiet room, lawyers speaking for us while we barely looked at each other. Years of marriage dismantled in less than half an hour. The house went to her. I didn't want it. Every room was haunted by memories that had turned sour. I walked away with my share of the savings, a car, and the determination never to look back. A week later, Laura showed up at my apartment in tears. She begged, pleaded, promised she'd change. She said we could raise the baby together, that we could try again. But I'd already seen the truth in her eyes that morning when she whispered, "I don't know." There was no trust left. And without trust, there was nothing. I closed the door, gently but firmly. It wasn't cruelty. It was survival. Starting over wasn't easy. I moved into a small, one-bedroom apartment, bare walls, second-hand furniture. Nothing fancy. The silence was heavy at first. But it was mine. For the first time in months, I could breathe. I began therapy. Something I never thought I'd do. Week by week, I peeled back the anger, the shame, the hurt I didn't want to admit out loud. And slowly, I began to understand that betrayal hadn't destroyed me. It had stripped me down. Yes. But it also forced me to rebuild from the ground up. I dusted off old hobbies, painting, hiking, simple things that reminded me of who I was before the lies. And little by little, the pieces of me I thought I'd lost came back. I thought betrayal had ended me. But the truth was, it gave me the chance to begin again. The months after the divorce were quiet, almost painfully so, but in that silence, I began to find pieces of myself again. I reached out to old friends I hadn't seen in years. At first, it was awkward walking into a bar alone, scanning the room for familiar faces, but they welcomed me back without hesitation. We laughed about old memories, made new ones. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of belonging that wasn't tied to a broken marriage. On weekends, I laced up my boots and headed for the trails. The Texas air was sharp and clean, and each mile I climbed felt like shedding another layer of weight I'd carried. At the summit, with the wind on my face and the horizon stretching wide, I felt something I hadn't in years: freedom. At home, I pulled out the old easel I'd stored in the back of a closet. The first strokes of paint were clumsy, but it wasn't about perfection. It was about reminding myself I was more than pain, more than betrayal. With each canvas, I felt the scaffolding of a new life taking shape. A year later, when I was finally steady on my own 2 feet, I met Rachel. She wasn't anything like Laura. Where Laura was polished and restless, Rachel was steady, genuine, and unpretentious. We met through mutual friends. Started with coffee, then long walks, and hours of conversation that didn't feel forced. From the start, I told her the truth about the marriage, the affair, the child who wasn't mine. I expected hesitation, maybe even pity. But Rachel just nodded and said, "Thank you for trusting me with that." No judgment, no rush, just honesty. With her, I learned that love doesn't erase scars, but it doesn't have to reopen them either. Looking back now, I see it clearly. Betrayal didn't just break me, it remade me. Laura's choices stole a chapter from my life, but they didn't steal the whole story. The pen is still in my hand, and I get to decide how the next pages are written. Brothers, if you were me, how would you have walked away quietly or stood and exposed the truth? Share your thoughts below. And if this story struck something in you, like, share, and subscribe for more stories that remind us we are not alone.